back after a long hiatus with another episode of Saint Talks, and also with a new layout. Special shout outs to Starfish for making it for us. And we're joined, of course, with a special guest, which you can see on the screen. Please say hi.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Rizzo.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, Riss is the commissioner of a league called the WPF, which is a massive 600 people server. But we'll talk more about that once we get into the discussion. So thank you for being here, of course, Riss.
Yeah, no, of course.
Let's go ahead and jump right into it, since it's been a long time. Let's go ahead and move on to the first topic we're going to talk about today, which is the kinds of leagues in the community. Now, naturally, draft league, there's obviously a disparity between elite players, mediocre players, and less skilled players. But of course, there are certain types of draft leagues that are tailored for everybody. You have the leagues that are considered at the top of the table. The biggest one being LD, of course, but being extremely respected for their skill, and the players in the league will traditionally perform at a high level in everything they partake in. Such as DPLs, such as individual tours, such as other leagues. We also have leagues like OLT and DGBA that are probably up there as well. Not as much as LD, of course, but they're still there to, I say, as fall under. So they're also considered like highly competitive and highly exclusive in terms of the coaches that are accepted into the league. And then you also have other leagues that are tailored for other people. Riss, would you like to talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, the other leagues we're talking about there is definitely one of the WPF sort of styles, right? So the different styles you were talking about there, you're definitely right. One of the things that I think people in the community will use to make a distinction for their league is like, well, am I kind of niche? Like, do I run like, am I only VGC league? Like, that's not obviously super mainstream, but like, it's not super common either. So maybe you attract a certain different crowd that way, or something like APA or WPF. It's like a hub that's doing maybe 4 or 5 things all at the same time, trying to make as much of a community as possible. There's a community aspect to every sort of league that you would just mention, the LDs, the trick houses, the DGBA, WPF, but it's how that community aspect is like racked and stacked with the independent skill level of the coaches, right? So that's definitely something else that I wanted to talk about, is how like interaction with a server and your skill level as a coach, your like your sort of standard always operating at this level skill is sort of equitable to what makes you marketable, I guess, to these sort of hard to get into leagues like OLT, for instance.
For sure. This is, of course, not to say that the top leagues don't have a good sense of community,
Sure.
and they don't prioritize the interaction between coaches and spectators and just how this operates within itself. But there's definitely also an added emphasis on competition that usually just translates over time and experience with
Sure.
and the league being well known. And you of course also have leagues like Riss has just talked about, such as WPF, MLP, SBT, and all those I would say smaller leagues, or like the middle class or lower class of not of like draft league competitiveness.
Yeah.
Draft league competitiveness, not in terms of how the draft league is ran, just from a competition standpoint. You have leagues like that are more designed to be home bases for people start to get their feet wet in the community, discover if they're interested in staying in the community long term, and if they are, what they want to do with it. Do they want to go further on and develop their skills as a player by challenging themselves at a higher level of competition, or do they want to just have that joy and passion for the game by staying within their home leagues and playing similar people that they just have really good interactions with? That's something I think a lot of draft league players kind of decide for themselves somewhere down the line, and they discover whether they want to be one place or another, and they just kind of slowly drift. And of course, there's no real right place. It just really depends on how the person's feeling at the time. But it's definitely something that is very, I think, present in our community, and something that a lot of draft league players would fall under.
it's all like expectation management, right? So like as you grow more acclimated to the community and your sort of draft league experience across a variety of leagues, you sort of find yourself innately asking like, what do I want out of my draft league experience? So like we've found that over a certain period of time, like Sam mentioned a moment ago, you have these sort of starter leagues, right? Where maybe you join a friends league and it's like 15 of you guys and you go through and you do your season and then you discover like, oh, WPF is a thing. So you go and hang out there, maybe you get into a draft league, you find out that there are sort of concrete levels of skill to sort of get measured against. And you're like, okay, well, naturally I want to get better at this, like almost everyone does. And then you keep building up that sort of rapport with different people around the community, and you find out, well, wow, I've been in WPF for 3 seasons now. I'm an A division guy. Where does that fit in with Trickhouse or OLT or whatever? Maybe I'm going to go try and do some other stuff. And I feel like that's a decent segue to sort of get into another part of the types of draft league communities. It's not just singular draft league. There's also like team tours, singles tours. A lot of main leagues will have a sort of off-season thing, right? Where like maybe it's not the actual main event, but it's still draft league content to sort of get you in the mix and talking with the people in the community so that you can progress in whatever your ambitions wind up being. And again, like you said, there's no wrong answer. It's just whatever you want.
Yeah. Let's piggyback on that idea then and move on to our second topic of the day, which is your draft league resume. Now, what we mean by this is just everybody, of course, as part of playing in leagues, same thing as it would be your an application on like a real life a job. The more you play, the more your name becomes known, and then the more likely somebody will notice you, because I like to say that the community is connected by a series of cobwebs. I think you can easily find people that are in a top level league who also hang out in like a medium level league. Again, all this is by competition, not by how the leagues are ran. Disclaimer.
Saints calling everybody peasants right now. Watch out.
Don't worry. But there are obviously people that hang out in different servers for whatever reason, and so nobody starts off like as like the true top player in the draft league. That just isn't realistic. Everybody starts from the bottom and they work their way up, honestly, through a lot of luck, but also through building a lot of connections. And I think that the way that people interact with each other, especially in more commonly or like more public servers, says a lot about your presence and your likability, and as a result adds to your chances of being added then to a higher caliber league. I know for sure that in servers such as Hive, I've witnessed conversations that we've had about people, both good and bad, who have given us an impression through a sort of events or a sort of actions, whether it be in terms of their playing ability, in terms of their chat presence, in terms of shit post, whatever. And they give that sets, I think, a precursor on what your reputation is, and what kind of baggage would then come with potentially adding you to one of those servers. Because I'd say that there's always like pluses, like yeses, like good and bad like aspects of adding a prospective person to a server, because every person brings a slightly different dynamic to a server. So for us to, I think, best identify those people, we definitely look at a multitude of factors before making the final decision on whether or not a person fits into the servers that we then call home.
That's it, man. Yeah.
Riss, is there something that you look for in particular when you're adding new people to the WPF? Obviously, very public server, very huge, and also has like tremendous amounts of leagues within the league itself.
Yeah.
How do you go about, when your league is as public as it is, picking out the right people for for league positions, and who to get rid of if they're not if they're not, acting the way they need to be in
Yeah.
a public server. How do you go about that?
So I feel like at the ground level with somebody who's just a spectator in WPF or any of these other leagues, you may not have the sort of not gratitude, the grasp on how complex or how much time and effort is put into resourcing the various decisions that go on within a league. So much to say that like in a typical cycle, a league cycle, right? So like there's normally a month, like 3 weeks to a month that my league specifically, but I feel like most leagues as well, will specifically allocate to the application process. So you throw out an application, every sort of outlet you can think of, every other league's plug chat, Facebook, MySpace, whatever you got, you vomit it everywhere, and you get all these people that flock to WPF, for an example, and you have to rack and stack those guys. Okay, so this dude is super active in the chat. He's kind of toxic, kind of a nerd, whatever. Like maybe he's not that great. And you have to find a way to compare this guy with the other 208 applicants I think we had for season 7 to figure out who gets the 90 spots in our 5 divisions. So something that Saint said a moment ago, I can't overstate the emphasis of it. Everybody talks to everybody all the time about who's in the community, how well they're doing, are they an idiot, whatever. It's always going on, man. So like when I bring that list of 208 people who applied to the league to my mod chat and we say, okay, let's figure out who gets in. Obviously, guys who have been around, we know that they're good chat presences, they're good at being coaches, whatever. They get sort of first dibs. We want those guys to stick around. We want to be able to provide that service for them of a stable draft league environment, which I feel like everybody at one point or another has yearned for. Because like I can't be the only guy who had this experience. Tell me if I'm wrong, saying where you first get into a draft league, your very first one, it probably dies, or your second or third one dies 2 or 3 weeks in because they didn't want to keep up with the doc. Nobody wants to deal with that. So you apply to these sort of leagues saying it's not going to die. I'm going to see this through the end. And it's hard, man. There's a lot of different factors that go into it, but that depends on what kind of league you're applying for. WPF, we want to make sure that we're providing a good community for everybody, and that's sort of ultimately what it backtracks to.
Yeah, and something like my server, like OLT, for example, we definitely have a history. I think that people recognize now in Draft League, that because we've been around for a very long time, longer than a lot of the leagues that are currently running around. So we look at coaches a very different way, because we are trying to pick out, in a sense, we're trying to pick out the cream of the crop, because like unfortunately, for newcomer, we might not know you, and like there are times, of course, where we take somebody very new and try to give them an opportunity to start off of. But usually, most of the people that are in my league, that from a playing perspective, we might joke about their skill level for whatever reason, but when your lowest division still has people that are probably in the top divisions of like other leagues, that says something about the overall skill caliber. And of course, we still put an emphasis on the the home environment, the social aspects of Draft League. We don't want to add somebody that might be the best player but wouldn't behave in a way that positively enhances the league or adds to the league in a positive light, if that makes sense. We wouldn't want to add somebody like that if it meant diminishing the sense of community that we have in our servers. I say we as in like people that also run leagues that are higher up in terms of a competition standpoint. We try to add the right people that will help enhance our leagues, not only from a competition standpoint, but also in terms of helping the community stay very vibrant and very positive, and give people a reason to stay. And unfortunately, that comes with not being able to invite everybody that wants the opportunity. But it's also but I think it's something for people to then because that helps drive people, because then they feel like they have something to prove, and helps them helps encourage them to perform, or make the connections necessary to then get into these more exclusive servers, and from there, they can decide, what they want to do with that privilege.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. No, so like to build a little bit further off of on the idea of a draft league resume, right? So we've explored pretty heavily the resume part, right, where you're building references and notable achievements, whatever. One of the ways that you kind of make knocks on the post, right, is if you take the idea of I am a contributive, positive, active member of the community. That's what everybody wants through the different levels of competitiveness, right? So like if you want to succeed in WPF, you need to be a inclusive, active, what am I trying to say? Pleasant chat presence. Fuck, that's hard to say. If you want to be a contributive member of OLT, you need to do all of that, plus be pretty good at the game and show a capacity for growing. If you want to be in LD, you need to do all of that and then maintain it at a high level consistently, right? It keeps building on itself. But one of the ways that you, as the person listening to this who maybe isn't at that level, you sort of build on that by competing in singles tour or team tours, and you build on that positive networking that you've already accomplished with WPF or APA or whatever. Maybe you try and get on somebody's team, show them that you're a team player too. You know what I mean? And that is something concrete that you could then take to Saint and say, hey, I want to get into OLT season. What's the next season you got coming up?
11.
Hey, I want to get into OLT season 11. I was a finalist in Clash of Kings and did all this, whatever. That's something else tangible that he can take to his mod team and be like, hey, this guy's got the qualifications. He's cool in the chat. Let's get him in. And it's almost as simple as that.
Yeah. For me, there are a few ways you build up this resume. Your playing skill, 100%, Matt, is a factor. Like, it's an objective lie to say that, like, if you are like an absolute elite player, that you will not, have certain more desirable factors. They're usually, you having a good skill level is definitely a part of your resume. Having good interactions with people, and just having overall good energy that bounces off with what is the existing culture, that's also part of it. And there are definitely some people that unfortunately have come to the community and made a few mistakes here and there, and as a result, they haven't been allowed into certain places. But that's not to say there isn't a home or a place that those people can go. But it definitely has negative ramifications in terms of where these people are accepted in. And unfortunately, that can be a little bit of an issue at times, I think, especially for those people, because they just get perceived as less popular because of just because other people in the community that may be in a higher up league or like a different or a different place are just talking about this person in a negative light, and that just creates a snowball effect. So definitely, if you can, try just to be try to be yourself. Don't try to be a jerk off. Like, don't try to just suck people off to get into places. It's not going to work. It makes you look worse. But definitely try to be just a positive presence. Your playing ability, it can help. It usually does. But at the end of the day, I think who you are as a person, and just staying true to yourself, and also just maintaining those positive connections with people is really what gets you places in the community.
And the last sort of caveat I think I have for that train of thought there, if any of you listeners want an example of what negative marketing can do for you, let me ask you one question, Saint. Would you ever allow Aaron 12 to be an OLT?
See, I'm hesitant to call people out specifically. I wouldn't say that he would necessarily be a good fit for the league. No. He's okay. The thing with Aaron, for those of you that don't know, Aaron 12. I don't really know how to describe him.
This isn't me trying to badmouth him. I'm using that as an example because, well, matter of fact, I'm not trying to talk over you. Go ahead, man.
He's a person who I think has made some questionable decisions and actions in the past that have definitely negatively that have definitely make him look a little bit worse in the community, to put it very lightly, I think. And
Yeah.
as a result, I probably would not be able to allow him into the league because he would not necessarily be example of somebody I'm really looking for to help improve my. Because you've got to understand, when it comes to these private servers, we when we add people to a server, we also accept that we add their reputations to our servers. If I'm adding, somebody who is a bit of a meme in the community to my server, that says something about the way my server looks to the public eye who also know about this person, and um so there's definitely a very fine line. I can't say that he would exactly be on like the top of my list necessarily, but maybe if time goes and things change, we would have a different discussion. But at the moment, I probably wouldn't. No.
Yeah, and no, and that's the point that I was trying to illustrate. So like Aaron 12, in my experience historically, when I first started Draft League 2.5 years ago, whatever it was now, he was known as an explicit joner. Dude joined 12, 15 leagues at a time, whatever, would get through drafting and then would be replaced by week 2 or 3 because he just stopped showing up, whatever. And that became such a habitual thing in the community that this dude was everywhere and he was getting replaced in everything that it stuck with him. Even to this day, 1-2 years later, and he's a super good guy. He's a nice guy. I've talked to him fairly recently, and to my knowledge, he claims he had other stuff going on in the past, which I don't particularly care to get into. It's not my business. But I'm using that as an example to convey that if you choose to have that sort of negative connotation with your name in the community, it sticks with you for a long while. So be careful when you guys are talking in general chats everywhere, and just know that your experience in those leagues isn't going unnoticed.
Mhm. There's also a lot of other factors that go into it. The amount of the leagues you play in, the people you play, the people you hang out with. Those are all factors. But I think I think that the idea, has been set, and I think people understand. So
Yeah.
let's move on to what I'd say is the last topic for the day. Should you, as a member of the community, want to start anew and make a draft league of your own? And for me, this is something that it really depends on just who you are. Like, it's I compare draft league, right, to like working at a chain
Like
store.
business.
Like
Yeah.
the commissioner is basically like the manager, or the like boss that's leading the operation, and then you have the admins who are like the managers. If we say that the commissioner is like the head, like the boss of the
You're the
overall
owner.
strategy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the owner. And then the players are just people that frequent the store, and then or your employees, however you want to call it. And you have to understand that there's a lot of, I think, politics like go into running a draft league. Maybe not like a beginner's draft league, like that has just started for the first time, and just has a lot of your closest friends in. But especially if you are advertising your league to a grander scale, like a grander uh, amount of the community, then you have to accept that there are certain politics that I think come into draft league that don't really get talked about.
Definitely.
Such as, well, this person has done this and this in the past. Would this person fit in our league, or do we need to, or should we just kick him because he did this and this in the past? Or this league is running at the same time as this other league. How can we be the one that gets the proper the better applicants to be attracted to my league over theirs? Like, there's a lot of politics that I think go under, especially if you are making like a league that is directed more towards getting bigger and getting more respected gradually over time. There's a lot of politics that I think that are not really known to people that lack the experience or lack the foresight to understand it. Honestly, I'd attribute the fact that I've been around a very long time as a person that has handled a lot of, I think, responsibility in terms of just from a moderation standpoint over the last few years. That I would attribute that to one of the only reason I know. And there's definitely a learning curve for newer people. Like, there's definitely things that you have to learn and progress on. Um, if you are a brand new league owner, like you're just not gonna. The fact of the matter is that you're not going to know how to do it all, and so you're gonna make mistakes. So it's all about identifying those mistakes, having a conversation, and then proceeding to improve on those mistakes and getting those and making it better so that it isn't a problem again for future seasons, and just rinse and repeat and rinse and repeat, because I don't think there's ever like a true thing as a perfect season. Like that just doesn't happen.
No, definitely not. Well, and the question becomes, perfect for who? Perfect for the owner? Perfect for the mods or the coaches?
Yeah,
It's open for interpretation.
for sure. And of course, like if you are just to make a league, for your friends and just like have fun with it, like I honestly really encourage it, because I think it's a very like I think it's like a fun thing to do, right?
Yeah.
Like I think everybody thinks about it every once. Like I think everybody in terms of their draft league careers thinks about it once. What would it be like if I had my own league and I could do this and this with it? I just say shoot for realistic goal lines to start off of, because you as the commissioner of the league have to make a decision basically. Like when I start this league, what do I want it to be? Do I want it to be a friend server? Do I eventually have goals to progress it as a server so that it's more competitively based? Do I want the server to like be a project that I continue to work on and improve over time, or is this like a one-time thing just to have some fun and then it's gonna be and then we're not gonna do another season? Those are all things that I think you as the commissioner slash league owner have to decide for yourself, and experiment with, and like because I think it's a much harder and much more complicated conversation to have than just say, oh, we're gonna run a league. Like there's definitely a lot more that I think people that don't have the experience don't recognize, especially when they're starting it off for the first time.
Yeah.
Like a lot goes into it. Like
There's so much that goes into it. Yeah. So I feel like something that a good portion of the community doesn't, maybe not. There are a lot of people that when they start a league, I feel like don't pay the proper respect to the idea that the owner or the guy that made the server took it upon himself to do that, sets the tone and the vision for the league like 100% of the time. And I say that because time and time and again, when these leagues start up and they're a lot of fun and they want to be big bad whatever, and then they crumble because the owner either he like took on too much at one time and overworked himself, got burnt out, whatever, or just didn't keep up with it like he should have. That goes back to the idea of sort of league identity. Like what do you want from your experience? Do you want to just be what Saint was talking about a moment ago, that sort of perfect world where you take your 10 to 12 online buddies, you guys make a league and you just keep it there in between yourselves? That sounds like an awesome experience, but it's never going to be a WPF or an OLT. Or do you want to do something like I had a train of thought and then it just went away. I don't know where it went. Hold on.
Okay, I'll take something off it.
Go ahead.
But it's not to say never. Like there is definitely like over time, you never know how Discord the community will change and shift. There are certain leagues that were there like way back in the day that don't exist now. MPO is probably the most well-known example, but that's not really a thing now. Like people don't really talk about MPO. We're in a time of draft where that's not really like a lot of players. I think the newer ones don't know what the MPL was, and they don't know about like the times when YouTube was required for you to play in like certain highly prestigious leagues. Like those times have gone, and so as times have gone, like the idea of who's at the top is different. I will say though that it's better to set like realistic expectations of what your league is. Like despite like it's not to say that you can't get there ever. Like that's just simply untrue. With the right like factors put into it, I'd say that a lot of things are possible in the community. Like things have changed dramatically since I've been around. That's for sure. But like considering the top leagues now, right? With the exception of UDL, which is not really something that the public knows about, That's a very private server with a lot of competition in it, but that's not really something that most people know about. All of these other servers that you would consider at the top, right? Hive, OLT, LD, DGBA, like stuff like that, Like we've all been around for like 3 or 4 years, honestly. Like it's taken a very long time for us to get to where we are now. So it's very unrealistic, I think, for somebody starting off for the first time to just say, oh, my league is going to be like this, like just like this, since in like a matter of like whatever time. Just because it takes a lot of time and practice for leagues to develop that sense of stability that the top leagues that most people talk about are at right now.
Yeah.
And
No,
of course,
is that what that sounded like a moment ago? You were
not
saying that
really.
like it's not realistic to say that they won't ever get there. I felt like maybe I misspoke.
I just reworded it a little bit. Don't worry, I know what you meant.
Okay, sorry.
I did it in a video with Azar earlier this year. Don't worry.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, but yeah, there is definitely like you have to take into account that while your league is growing, all these other leagues may also be continuing in their rhythm. So I think if you really want your league to like stand out in a way, just be patient and just do your best to run the league to the best of your ability. And who knows, if you're still committed and passionate about it, 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 2 years down the line, however long, then then the community will change, and then maybe maybe you will be in that position to where your league is suddenly at the top. It's not to say it's definitely possible, but you have to be committed to the project, and you have to also you have to make sure that you know exactly what you're looking for, and you don't try to get too overly ambitious, because there are definitely like those guys that start off ridiculously ambitious and it just falls apart. So just be careful and be smart about it. That's all I'm trying to say, I think.
Yeah, no, I feel like you made pretty good points. I will say one more thing quickly, just that I remembered while you were talking. One of the things that we talked about earlier that sort of correlates back to what we're talking about now, about whether or not you should make a draft league, is that sort of that knowledge and visibility of the community as a whole. I feel like at any one time there are like maybe 1,000, 2,000 sort of draft league players on Discord daily, in our sort of corner of the community, right? Which means that at any one time there may be 1 or 2 sort of team tours going on, or maybe 1 or 2 singles tours going on at any one time. If you are able to sort of look at the lay of the land and say like, okay, I want to start a league, or I want to start a project, and you can say, is the quote unquote market oversaturated for what I'm trying to do or what I want to do? I think that will also have different dividends that pay tribute to whether or not your project is successful. And one of the good examples that I thought of earlier before we started taping this was I was talking to a guy in the WPF the general chat. I think his name was High Seas, in which he was plugging a singles tour that like just started looking for applicants today. For it was like $100 cash prize, whatever. And I had told him, I was like, well, hey man, there's this other singles tour that is also starting up in this section of the community. It may be smarter for you to like, maybe put your project on hold for a couple of weeks so that we're not explicitly overlapping and you'll get better turnout. And he seemed relatively resistant to the idea. Like, no, we'll be fine. It'll be okay. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. But I feel like the tour that he was plugging, he has relatively high ambitions for it. So you'll get there. It just depends on you how long it's going to take, I guess.
Sure. Yeah, it's just, I think understanding the schedule in which like the big tours and big events are happening, and balancing them out so that you don't get like an overlap, is very important and underrated as a factor.
Mm-hmm.
And is something worth looking at when it comes to making your own league or making your own tour, or just honestly starting something new. Because a lot of time people in the community honestly have pretty great ideas. Like DPO was a idea that just was brought up one day in LD, and then it became like a fruition, and now it's a what is considered the biggest, most competitive tour in draft league. And then there's of course all the single tours still like Trick House and Cash Gang, all that
Yeah.
stuff, and those are up there as well. But those come up was like those were made by like a very established like players that had been around long enough to understand the meta of draft, like, which in a sense, if that makes sense. They understand how people operate in the community, and they understand how to market their stuff in a way that allowed them to become the events they are now.
That's it.
So
Yeah.
I think you just have to understand that especially if you're lesser known in the community, you need to put a very, I think, realistic but also like very smart like time. You need to time everything very smart, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And make sure you're advertising things at the right time, or else unfortunately your event might not get the right traction, and might not get the audience that you desire. But yeah.
Which I think, too, if I could interrupt for a quick second,
Oh
the
yeah, of
sort of
course.
the sort of flip coin to that is that if you are not explicitly trying to factor in the sort of community basis to what it is you're going on or what you have going on, if you have like a smaller league and you're trying to decide like, hey, when do we want to start this next season? One of the things that you should be paying attention to, if not the schedule of WPF, OLT, whatever, there's always something going on in the community. There's always something going on. So if you are comfortable sort of tossing that to the wind and saying, you know what, I don't want my league to sort of be dictated by whatever else is going on in the league, something else you definitely should be thinking about is timing it with the different releases in the Pokemon community as a whole. And I say that thinking about all the leagues that were starting up last like September or October, like a couple of weeks before Generation 8 came out, people were starting Gen 7 League. And I didn't understand that because the second Gen 8 drops, that's all anybody wants to play. There was like a 6-month period there where if you just said the word Z moves in a public lobby, after Sword and Shield came out, there were throw up reactions, whatever. People were so tired of it. So I feel like that definitely would have been intuitive to keep track of if somebody was looking to start a league late last year, as an example.
Yeah. Also piggyback on that idea, like OOT's first season in Gen 8 coincidentally happened to be when the first leagues came out, the first DLC came out, and because of that, because we waited to start the league, we were able to start it right as the leagues came out. So we were the first league that really got to use the leagues. Yeah. And as a result, we became super popular that season. Like everybody wanted to play in our season. We had anyone from like K-Crick to Jacko to like Jake, all these like elite players. And it's just, timing it, knowing your timing and like being patient. Like don't force things if they aren't coming at a natural time. Just let them, flow. And you'll get success, because even like leagues that are lesser known, if you time things right, like you will get a massive audience and it will be a success.
That's it. It's weird to keep sort of drawing parallels between the community and like a business, but it really is. The more and more you think about it, just without the money in those cases.
It's just like the marketing and everything is very similar.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think that's it for this episode. Anything else to say, Riss, before we move on? Hello.
Really appreciated the episode. It was a fun time.
Okay, great. Yeah. And on that note, we're gonna call it a day. Subscribe. Watch my other videos if you're interested. If you're not, fuck you. You're wrong. And we'll see you next time. Peace.